Hello, and thank you for joining me again. This is the second of two lessons I'm giving on the parable of the workers in the vineyard. In the first lesson, I gave important contextual background information that helps us to understand why Jesus spoke the parable of the workers in the vineyard, and it will help us to interpret his meaning and make proper application, relevant application as well. So the parable of the workers in the vineyard occurs in Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 15. Jesus makes application in verse 16. So I'm going to read the parable, Matthew chapter 20, picking up in verse 1. So the Lord said, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers, workers for his vineyard. Now, when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day." Now, I want you to note that when he had agreed with the workers. A denarius was the common day's wages, or the common wages of a common laborer for a day's work. So the landowner hired some people, but he had an agreement with them. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, "You also go into the vineyard," and underline these words if you underline in your Bible, "whatsoever is right, I will give you." Those are some key words. So they went. Verse 5, again, he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour. This would be about noontime and about 3 in the afternoon. And he did likewise. And about the 11th hour, around 5 p.m., he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, "Why have you been standing here all day?" They said to him, "Because no one hired us. We've not had opportunity." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard," and here again, underline please, "whatever is right you will receive." So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, "Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first." And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, these are the 5 o'clock guys, they each received a denarius. They got paid a full day's wage for 1 hour's work. But when the first came, now these were the first hired guys, they supposed that they would receive more. Now what's that tell us? They had been watching what other people got paid. And they likewise received each a denarius. It's what they had contracted for. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, "These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them and said, "Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me," here's the question, "is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good? Do you have a problem with my generosity to others?" Okay, so very quickly, let's work through the story here a little bit, hit some high points. A landowner, he hired some workers to work in his vineyard, and he hired 5 different groups at different times of the day. The first group he hired early, let's say about 6 a.m. The last group he hired around 5 p.m., an hour before quitting time. An important distinction between the first group and the others is the first group went to work with a contract. They obviously had negotiated with the man, and they agreed with him to do a day's work for a day's pay, no more, no less. The later hires all went to work without a contract. That's an important detail. All they had was the man's word. So they went to work without a contract. It's solely on the basis of the man's word to treat them fairly. Whatever is right, I will give you. According to custom, the man paid his workers at the end of the workday, and so he instructed his steward to pay the 5 p.m. workers first. And obviously the steward paid them in view of others. Now, normally that's not a wise practice, but there was a method to the madness, I think we can say. And so the 5 p.m. guys received a full day's pay for 1 hour's work. We say, well, man, the boss is very generous, and indeed he was. Now, the 6 a.m. workers, they were watching what others received. And they supposed, we read this, they supposed they would receive more than what they had contracted for, but the boss paid them. So on the basis of the 1 hour guys getting paid for a full day's labor, the 6 a.m. guys, they suppose, oh, all right, man, we've worked and we've been here all day, and in the heat of the day, they suppose, well, we're gonna get more. But the boss paid them the amount for which they had contracted. The 6 a.m. workers, they accused the boss of treating them unfairly. They said, these last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden and the heat of the day. So here's where they were. Because they had worked more hours, done more work, maybe picked more grapes, and under different conditions, they assumed this somehow entitled them to a higher level of status than others. Now the boss responded to those 6 a.m. workers. He responded to their accusation that he was treating them unfairly. And to the spokesman of the group, evidently he was the union rep, the boss reminded him that he had paid him the exact amount for which he had contracted to go to work. And then we had that question, is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? We could rephrase that, it's my business and not yours how I run my business. And again, do you have a problem with my generosity to others? Okay, so that's the parable, that's the story. What's it about? What does it teach? Well, the Lord followed the story with chapter 6, or verse 16 of chapter 20, And he said, so the last will be first, and the first last. So basically the same thing, end of Matthew chapter 19. The Lord just inverted the order, but the last will be first. So, or in this way, the last will be first, the first last. For many are called, but few chosen. So let's talk about this, what it means. Let's try to make some relevant application here. This teaching concerns the kind of servants for which God is looking and which he chooses in his work. So understand what was the vineyard owner doing, and why, for example, was he paying everybody in full view of everyone else? Well, he was testing attitudes. Now, obviously, harvest lasted more than one day, and so what was he looking for? What was he testing? Which workers would he hire the next day? Which ones would he not hire? I think we know the answers to those questions. So that brings us to understand that God is ever sifting among his children for workers. God is a discriminating employer, and he chooses his servants wisely. For what kind of servants is he looking? What are the qualities for which he's looking? He is looking for servants who will trust him to do them right, who will serve him simply because they love him, who are not preoccupied with what they're going to get out of it, Now, remember Peter's question. This all goes back to his question. We followed all. We've left all and followed you. What are we going to get? What's in it for us? So the Lord is looking for servants who will trust Him to do right, who will serve Him because they love Him, who are not preoccupied with what they get, and who are not envious of others' blessings. Preachers sometimes have a problem here. Preachers sometimes wonder, well, why is it that it seems God is blessing another man who, he really doesn't teach the Word? Oh, I mean, he's a cheerleader and he hypes God's people up, but he doesn't ground them in the Word. All right? And it seemed like God is blessing that man, but here's another preacher over here, man, I'm laboring in the Word and the doctrine, and it seemed like nothing's happening here. And so, you get envious. Preachers get envious. And I think that's a problem that we all struggle with from time to time in various ways. All right, so the kind of servants for which God is looking and which He chooses to use in His work. Now, additionally, the parable looks forward to the judgment seat of Christ, and it teaches about the basis for eternal rewards. Now, again, chapter 19, verse 30, but many who are first will be last, and the last first. Just looking ahead to the judgment seat of Christ. Or chapter 20, verse 16, so in this way the last will be first, and the first last. And I just want to call attention, many who are first will be last. Jesus didn't say all. He just said many. So what's happening? How can we make some application here? Understand, God has children who are first in terms of abilities and talents. I think that among these are those who are gifted with musical abilities and talents, and who are first in terms of maybe getting recognition and accolades, and maybe who use their talents not so much for the glory of God, but for selfish purposes. And I think that we could include in here some celebrated evangelists. They're first in terms of they have a status in the eyes of people, and this is a good preacher, and maybe some have celebrity. Some of God's children, God has children who are some of them first in terms of being long tenured church members, who, because of their long tenure, they have at least a perceived status. Maybe they think that of themselves, others think it of them, and who maybe perceive that they outrank others who come later, who maybe because of their time and rank view themselves as somehow more deserving than others. So talking about people that church members that they think they've paid their dues and they've earned their stripes. Now, remember the problem that the early workers had with what the boss did. You made them equal to us. That really chapter hides. You made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of the day. So it would be like, no, it's not fair that somebody comes along and is a new church member and they're on an equality with me who's been here a long time. So, excuse me. Here we go. Many believers who are first in terms of recognition and accolades and perceived status will be last in terms of being honored by the Lord at the judgment seat of Christ. That's what this is teaching us. They will be last in terms of receiving eternal rewards. Why? Because their service was incorrectly motivated, right? And I think of the Lord speaking of the Pharisees and the scribes. This is in the Sermon on the Mount. I call it the Lord's Kingdom Instruction on the Hill. And I do that because it wasn't a sermon in as people understand that term sermon today. People here, we use sermon today, and most people think a man gets up to give a religious talk, and he becomes another man when he gets up in the pulpit, and Jesus never did that, and you don't find that in the Bible. But anyway, last in terms of reward, recognition at the judgment seat of Christ, because their service incorrectly motivated. But anyway, I didn't finish the thought with the Pharisees and the scribes in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus, in teaching, for example, about prayer or giving or fasting, he said, "Don't do these things. Don't be like the hypocrites who do these things. They make themselves conspicuous in order that they may be seen of men." And so the Lord said, "Verily, I say to you, they have their reward." In other words, the oohs and the ahs of others looking on and say, "Oh, what a holy guy." Jesus says that's all they're going to get. So they got some recognition and they got some accolades, but that's all they're going to get, because what they were doing, they weren't doing it for God. Okay, so let me just back up. Many believers who are first in terms of recognition and accolades and perceived status, they will be last in terms of being honored by the Lord at the judgment seat of Christ, and of receiving eternal rewards because their service was incorrectly motivated. Then many of those, conversely, many of those who will be highly honored and greatly rewarded will have served the Lord quietly and faithfully, not for what they hope to get out of it, but because they loved Him. They had a servant's attitude. They were unassuming. They were okay with just serving in obscurity, okay with, as we say, playing second fiddle. I think of the church in which I grew up, and there were always a lot of old ladies, and you often people didn't pay too much attention to them. You didn't think about them, but they were always there, and they were faithful. They loved. They prayed, and so I think that these old ladies are, that served the Lord faithfully because they loved Him, and just they were quiet. You wouldn't know they were there. I think a lot of these are the kind of people that they're going to be highly honored by Jesus Christ, and they're going to be rewarded by Him. While a lot of preachers are, they're going to be in heaven, and that's going to be good, but they won't receive much for their service because their motives were wrong. So this parable also teaches about kingdom standards of evaluation. Seniority and tenure are not factors in kingdom service and rewards, nor are they factors in the Lord evaluating the effectiveness of His servants. So seniority and tenure are not factors in kingdom service and rewards. There's no rank among kingdom servants unless we go back to what Jesus taught. He that is greatest among you, let him be the servant of all. And of course, there aren't too many people lining up for that. Where service is concerned in the kingdom, emphasis is not on quantity, but on quality. And I heard this one time, and I've always liked it. I'll share it with you. God does not judge His servants on the basis of the amount of grapes they pick. So, conclude with these words. The Lord is a generous employer. He far exceeded the bounds of generosity when He saved us. But He says, now, come to work for me, and I will pay you. The Lord will pay. He will reward us. He said He would. So, let's serve Him and trust Him in the matter of rewards. Let's understand that what He gives to others, that's none of our business. And we must ever keep in mind that whatever He sees fit to give us as far as rewards, blessings and rewards, look, that's much more, will be much more than we ever deserve. So some good teaching when it comes to serving the Lord as one of His subjects. Let's serve Him simply because we love Him. We could never repay Him for the gift of eternal life. And what an honor it is to be called by Him just to be a servant. So the parable of the workers in the vineyard, I hope you find this helpful and useful. If you like these lessons, please hit the like button. If you've not subscribed to my channel, I invite you to do so. That would be helpful. And as I've shared before, my notes are available to anybody who wants them. And I think I know there's some contact information. You can email me. And you request these, I'll get them to you. So, thank you. And the Lord bless you. And look forward to sharing the word of truth with you again. Thank you.